Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Princeton, where in our open and welcoming community, we live our message of hope, love, justice, and joy. We extend a special welcome to our visitors. We're very happy that you've joined us on this brisk morning. You'll find it nice and warm in here. We hope you've stopped by the newcomer table on your way in, but if you haven't, please do so after the service. That way we can add you to our email list and make sure you're invited to all the different events and programs that we have here in UU Princeton. Today is Super Bowl Sunday, so there is a Super Bowl brunch after the service. Everyone is welcome to stay for a soup and salad-themed delicious fellowship brunch. Your donations for that brunch will go to support our children's and youth ministry programs. So thank you for staying and contributing to ministering with our kids. We are also on this Super Bowl Sunday collecting canned soup for the good work of Arm in Arm. Our collection will help supply their community food pantries, which are in great need these days. If you brought soup and you didn't already put it on the table out there, if you did, that's fine. But if you didn't, we invite you to put it up at the table here in Channing when we greet one another a little bit further along in the service, or when you come up to light a candle. At either time when you come forward, please feel free to bring your soup up here and add to our table. And it's not only Super Bowl Sunday, the football kind, and the potluck and food drive kind of Super Bowl Sunday. It's also Super Foam Sunday. We are making the most of the theme of this de facto civic holiday here at UU Princeton. If you brought styrofoam for our Earth Ministry group to recycle on Super Foam Sunday, you'll see a table out there in Robinson, and you can leave it there and get more information on the next one. Also, after worship today, our Caring for Our Neighbors ministry is assembling spice packets for Arm in Arm. You'll see a bunch of spices out there. You can't miss it. If you'd like to stop by and help take big bags of spices and make them into little bags of spices for their community food pantries, you can do that there as well. And lastly, our auction is coming up, which is a small group of wonderful volunteers organized for the benefit of everything that our congregation does for a ministry moment about our upcoming auction, the one and only Aparna Zama.
Why, may I ask? Although I was prepared with a joke this morning, then I backed off. No jokes, too early in the morning. So I am here, Aparna Zama, as assistant to Louis Sr., who's doing all the work. And in fact, she's assembling the spice thing just outside. So there are a few important things to note about the fellowship auction. But before I jump into that, can I have a show of hands of folks who've never been to the fellowship auction or who have never heard about it before? All right then, for your benefit, I want to tell you what the fellowship auction is. It's really a fundraiser. There are many different ways we fundraise here, and some of the fundraising, the funds go to charities or ministries outside of UUCP. But in this case, the proceeds of this particular fundraiser go to the budget, the UUCP budget. So it's a very important one for us. But the most important thing about the fellowship auction is that it's a wonderful community building exercise. A lot of you have donated activities and events. We have over 100 activities, 100 not 100 dinners. I don't know how many dinners. Dinners, outings, learning sessions. We have tickets to various events, holiday homes, rentals at holiday homes being auctioned off. There's so much fun stuff to do. Literally, your entire social calendar for the year can be worked out just at the auction. So the auction is going to be 1 week long, February 13th, meaning this upcoming Friday at 8 o'clock, the auction will open and will close at the finale party on February 21st, Saturday between 5 and 7. We are going to gather right here in Channing, and we're going to have a blast. There'll be a lot of food and music, and we're going to have fun and close all the bids on that day. So what I want you to note here is that as part of the auction, we also have 5 raffle baskets. One example is just outside. It's got wine, international wines. We have baskets for chocolate and coffee and books and family-themed basket. So you can buy the raffle tickets starting today. Today, right after service, please buy your raffle tickets. Next Sunday, and then at the auction, we'll be selling those raffle tickets. Another important thing is that this is going to be entirely digital this time. So everybody who wants to bid will have to have an account on the platform that we're going to use, Octria, and you can start doing that later this week. An email blast will come through, and you'll know when to start making your account in Octria. But the bidding will start at 8 p.m. on February 13th, and the finale party is on February 21st. So if you're trying to build a community, have fun, get to learn your UUCP community better, this is your chance. So don't miss. If you're planning to do something else on February 21st, cancel that. Come to this. Just come to this, all right? So if you have more questions, Louise is doing a lot of work. You can ask her, but you can also ask me. There are plenty of volunteers, so just ask somebody and you'll be connected, but look for the emails also. So looking forward to having a fun 2 weeks and ending with February 21st. Don't miss. Thank you for listening.
Courage is resistance to fear, mastery of fear, not absence of fear. Mark Twain. And if you'll now join me in the unison affirmation printed in your order of service. The time will come when, with elation, you will greet yourself arriving at your own door in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, "Sit here, eat."
Here at UU Princeton, our Earth Ministry includes a group called Conscious Consumers, a community that spotlights how everyday choices shape the interconnected web of life. For the past few years, we've been developing what many of you know as the Fast for Earth Lent Challenge, a simple and focused opportunity for our community to reflect on our consumer habits. It's a chance to nudge us just a bit outside of our comfort zones so that we may live out our UU values with ever-increasing integrity. In the Christian tradition, Lent is a sacred season of preparation leading up to Easter. It begins on Ash Wednesday, lasts for 40 days, and is often observed with some sort of fasting practice, prayer, and service. In our tradition, we've embraced the spirit of Lent to encourage a fast for Earth. The practices of this eco-centered 40-day fasting challenge ask us to make personal adjustments or sacrifices, small or big, that support climate health, conservation, human and animal well-being, and our own lives. We invite everyone to participate in this tradition by choosing one environmental fast for the 40 days ahead, beginning next Wednesday, February 18th. You can do this perhaps by avoiding certain kinds of plastic packaging, pausing online shopping, that's the one I'm going to do, reducing or stopping the use of generative AI, trying meatless Mondays, or if you're vegetarian, try going vegan, or you can create a practice of your very own. Visit the Fast for Earth table in the lounge to find out more about some of the ways that these different eco-fasts can positively benefit the Earth.
This year, the group wanted to bring a short ritual into worship as a way of opening the door wider and inviting more of us into this shared practice. So today, we will premiere UU Princeton's first ever Fast for Earth ritual, which involves a gesture of releasing what does not serve us and choosing what does. So this is how it's going to work. Everyone who is willing and able, in person and online, should extend a hand with the palm up. In a moment, as I speak the words in your order of service, you'll make a fist with your hand as if grasping. Then, as you, the audience, reads your response, you'll open your hand as if letting something go. So let's begin with the unison affirmation, which is printed in the green insert in your order of service. Lent is a season of turning, not toward guilt, but toward care, not toward perfection, but toward intention. We release habits that harm the earth and in turn harm ourselves. We choose care and repair. We release what numbs or distracts us. We choose attention and love. We release the myth that our actions don't matter. We choose to begin. Now, to close the ritual, please place your hand over your heart. May you forgive yourself for the changes you haven't made yet. May you notice and celebrate the changes you already have. And in facing the challenges you feel ready to make, may this season be not about doing everything, but about doing something together.
So after the service, you're welcome to stop by the lounge to sign the Fast for Earth book and pick up a participation sticker. It's a cute little earth. And you can also get a string to tie around your wrist or a bag to remind you of your commitment throughout the challenge. If you see somebody wearing one of these symbols of participation, consider reaching out and asking about their challenge. It's a simple way to connect and share this experience together. Finally, we invite you to carry this opportunity beyond our walls. Tell at least one person outside the congregation about Fast for Earth and invite them to consider their own small eco commitment this season. Thank you for your participation today and for being part of this journey.
I think curiosity and courage go hand in hand. At least I'm sure I thought this as a child. As a child, I enjoyed eating, and my mother did most of the cooking. My mother was an excellent cook. I would have considered her to be a chef. I think my mother really enjoyed cooking. During my younger years, we always had a hot breakfast and dinner every day, even when my mother was working as a teacher full-time and in graduate school. I think my sister stepped up and helped with some of those meals during that time. And during the summer, my father would tend to the garden in our backyard. During special occasions, he was on the grill. Back then, barbecue was only a noun, and it was definitely spelled with a Q and not a C. At a very young age, I was the child who would at least taste whatever food was offered. I was the child who liked okra and oysters and liver. Not necessarily all in the same meal, but those were and still are some of my favorites. I think I had developed enough confidence and trust in my parents that it was easy for me to have a sense of curiosity and even courageousness, at least when it came to food. I'm certainly not suggesting that I liked everything they put in front of me. Beets and lima beans were a no. A firm no. They are still a firm no. Carrots used to be. Cheese was a no until I was about 10 or 11, when my father had grilled hamburgers and had melted a slice of American cheese on top of each one. He asked me if I wanted one. I looked over on the grill, saw the cheese, and gave him a decisive no. But he cut off a small triangular piece of a burger that had just enough cheese, and he moved the piece toward my mouth. He said, "Try it." I opened my mouth, and he fed it to me, and it was delicious. While I believe we must have a little curiosity to be courageous, even if we don't, there's something to be said for putting preconceived notions aside and making a clean slate and being free of expectations. Maybe having courage is, at least sometimes, about leaning in to what might be. With the words of Ali K.C. Bell, will you pray with me? May we find courage to revel in the experience of the mystery. May we approach the unknown with excitement, even if we can only muster a tiny bit. May we celebrate the curiosity that leads to searching. May we meet ourselves along the way and love us unapologetically. Blessed be, Ashe, and Amen.
Good morning. I was 17 years old, and I knew exactly how far I wanted to be from my home. Growing up 20 minutes from Princeton University and having pretty decent grades, I got asked a lot, so you're going to apply there, right? And I always had to restrain myself from saying, oh God, no. Though maybe the fact that I was 17 and pretty mouthy, the restraint didn't always work. But I was a staff brat. I had grown up climbing literally in the campus sculpture. My favorite is Sir Henry Moore's Oval with Points, which from 1989 onwards has been known instead in our house as the Green Bagel with Fangs. I was a staff brat. When I had a half day off from school, I might, as likely as not, be parked at one of the newly internet-ready computers in the Woolworth building. I was a staff brat. I had the chip on my shoulder that can only be truly understood by fellow Mercer County teenagers of my era. The point being, I thought I knew everything there was to know about suburban life, and especially suburban college town life. I had no idea exactly what I did want, but I knew I wanted something other than that. I love my parents, and I'm now very good friends with both of them, but I wanted a place a little farther than a swing up 206 or Route 1. The closest places I applied to college were in Philadelphia and New Brunswick. But looking back, I placed most of my eggs in the Boston basket. I had been born there, I had lived in Somerville, but I had moved to New Jersey before I could even really form memories. Jersey was what I knew, but college in Boston had the additional benefit of being where my extended family was. I wanted to be brave and experience new things. I wanted at least a taste of city life. But I wanted a safety net, too. If the University of Chicago hadn't waitlisted me, I would really have had to weigh some pros and cons more strongly between Boston and Chicago. Chicago was in a completely different region than the one I knew. It had family in the form of my mother's lovely cousin Roger and his wife Kathy, but it didn't have the grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins who would be 20 or 30 minutes away if I chose Eastern Massachusetts. I wanted just as much novelty as I could handle, with also the option of calling, as I often did, to say, Grandpa Rick or Grandpa Steve, can you come meet me at Alewife? I want to spend the weekend with you. At 17, that was about the kind of courage I could muster, and it's a choice I don't regret at all. I've been thinking about that kind of courage a lot recently, the courage to uproot yourself, see how far you'll go without a net, without the tether of your support system behind you. I thought about this a lot a decade ago when I was in the process of changing jobs. I applied to jobs in California and Chicago and even Wilmington, North Carolina. But that fall of 2016, with everything else going on not only in the world but in my own family, I found myself sitting there looking at an offer from UNC Wilmington to fly me down for a final round interview. And at that point, just into my 30s, I knew exactly how far from home I could manage to be, and that Wilmington was too far. I think of that moment whenever I hear the soundtrack to Moana, which in the way of a good Disney movie came out at exactly the right time for saying what I needed to hear. It takes courage to go out on your adventure, but also to realize where your roots and your home truly lie. I've been thinking about that kind of courage recently as well as I follow my Grandpa Rick and my Grandma Marjorie into the practice of family genealogy. In the way of those questions you want to always ask the departed, I wonder if they too dove into that practice because they were part of generations that moved around a lot. Both of my parents were born in military hospitals before the families settled down, both in Winchester, Massachusetts. Marjorie's father left 2 parents and 9 siblings in Galveston, Texas, to embrace the temporarily itinerant life of an academic scientist. Marjorie would periodically mention the 40 first cousins she had in Texas, whom she could name but never really knew. And she usually mentioned them while I was spending Christmas with her, and I could stare across the room at my 3 paternal first cousins. Grandpa Rick's Newark family, meanwhile, was based around a house that stayed in one family for over a century. And it might seem less peripatetic at first glance, but the more I dive into the decades of history that he was working on, the more that courage comes to the fore yet again. Part of his mother's family fled the 1848 counter-revolutions in the German Empire, and his father's mother, born in England, followed her mother and her 7 siblings across that same ocean. That matriarch, my great-great-great-grandmother, Sarah Ann, is who connects dozens of Youngs and Milburns and Warnocks and other surnames across the U.S. to this day. But what I didn't learn until this year was exactly what it took for a young widow to completely uproot her children and her settled London life. Sarah Ann got a letter from a family friend living in eastern Nebraska saying, basically, you've got multiple boys under 20. Come bring your girls and your boys and have a healthier life in the prairies. And for some reasons later known to her children, but some known only to her, off Annie went. I can't imagine doing that, to be honest. There's a courage that Sarah Ann had that I don't know that I ever will. But maybe I can relate a little to that letter from a friend. Suddenly, the distance away from home she could be got little, or like quite a lot larger. Somehow, a small spot in some distant county in Nebraska might also be home. Like Twain said, I'm sure a lot of it was terrifying to her at the time. But my great-great-great-grandma mastered it anyway, and her descendants, including me, have changed the better for it.
Once in the middle of the night, we were walking down a dirt road adjacent to some deep and dark woods. The sky was clear, the moon was full, lighting up beneath our feet the shadows of the tall trees beside us. They extended beyond us, too, into a large field on the other side of the road. The shadows were much taller, much fuller, much more imposing than ours. We could see their expansive, encompassing outline in the field. We could not see our own shadows, for they were swallowed up by the larger ones of the trees. We were teens, pathed between a field and the woods out past midnight. 4 of us, longtime friends. We knew each other's parents. We could name each other's pets. We knew the toppings that each preferred on our pizzas, and we had eaten a lot of pizza together. We had met years earlier at the same site of our midnight stroll, which was a church camp, at which teens were absolutely forbidden from doing exactly what we were doing. We had snuck out, as we had been doing for years, and were walking around the very familiar grounds, catching up, gossiping, and experiencing the late-night world. We spent most of our summers there and returned periodically throughout the year when there was a youth retreat of some sort. We didn't really care what sort that was, for the retreat or lock-in or con meant that we would be there and be in each other's company, and so we signed up for it. My favorite title for those retreats was Lock-In, for we knew we'd be able to call it that with a sense of irony. At some point, we'd break out of the lock-in. The title itself was almost a little bit of a challenge. One night, while returning to our dorm, we came toward a tree that we had passed 1,000,000 times before to see, from a distance, a person clearly leaning against the trunk. We paused, then sunk into the edge of the trees to our side, waiting for the person to leave. This would clearly be an adult, most likely one of the college-aged counselors who led us through these retreats. They could be out for a smoke. They could just be getting some fresh air. Or perhaps they knew what we were doing and were waiting for us to return. For the tree upon which they leaned was one that had to be passed to get back to the dorm. There was a field on the other side and a marshy bog in the woods near that tree. The trail was the only way back to the dorm. The tree was on that trail, and an adult waited for some reason at that tree. The minutes and hours tended to fly by on those nights when we were walking around and exploring, but they crept by while we just crouched in the woods waiting for the person to do something. They simply weren't leaving, which made it more and more likely that they were waiting, and almost certain that they were waiting for us. Nobody smokes for that long, and nobody stands there unmoving in the middle of the night for that long either, and this was before smartphones. They had not simply lost track of time scrolling away. They were waiting. As this dawned upon us, we whispered to one another the very worst of acknowledgments that we could have imagined. We uttered the two words that we had been able to avoid for years of this sort of behavior. Dejected, but also kind of curious to find out how it happened, we admitted with hushed tones to one another that we're busted. With that, we emerged and walked four wide toward the tree, ready to fess up and face whatever was going to happen. And it would happen to all of us equally. There was no leader with followers. This was a collective idea and a collective commission, and so the repercussions would be that as well, we would insist. We were surprisingly light as we stepped toward our fate, imagining at the worst our parents getting midnight calls to come get us, knowing for certain that a long lecture or two was coming our way from the camp director, expecting at the least for us to be separated as roommates and to be put in different small groups. Yet as we walked toward the tree, we noticed that the person remained unmoving even as we got closer and closer. We got quiet and became unnerved by their total stillness. We expected them to look our way and start to deal with us, but instead they remained still as stone, leaning against the tree. There was no change until we were very close. And it was only then that we realized that what we thought was the outline of a face was the outline of part of the trunk. There was a protuberance that in shadow and from a distance resembled a profile, but was really just a bumpy part of the tree trunk. The body that we imagined was the rest of the trunk. We had not been busted. We had been tricked by a tree and some shadows. Our friends at the camp who were better behaved than we were thought the act of courage was to just walk around in the dark woods in the middle of the night. Some of them would just never do that. Or they thought that the courage was to risk being caught to do that. They wouldn't have been willing to take that risk even if they wanted to go out. In both cases, what might be seen as courageous might also be seen as kind of stupid. Not so much the being out at night in the woods in a group part, that wasn't a big deal to me then or now, but risking what we risked to do so, that was probably dumb, but also not the dumbest thing that we could have done. Others did dumber things. We misbehaved with moderation and with sound minds. If that involved courage at all, it was calculated. And it would understandably not be seen as courageous or adventurous at all by some of our peers and most of the counselors. But there was most likely some courage in the walk toward our fate, a courage bolstered by the strength of the group. I felt mostly confident walking toward the tree person, but had I been alone, I would have worried much more. I would have wondered what would happen. Instead, I just walked toward it because it's what we were all doing. Whatever courage is, and it's many, many things, there are all kinds of courage. It's easier to embody and enact in a group. That much I know. Collective courage turns 1 to 4, and in that it turns uncertainty into confidence. Collective courage grows power, grows security, shares risk and answers complicity. It's more creative. It faces the shadows. It can take more stress and deliver more inspiration. Collective courage can even turn outrage into faith. This is the dynamic we see in collective acts of courage these days, acts created often out of a healthy kind of anger, the good kind of maladjustment. When people voice support for lives and values and systems that are under attack, we see and feel a growing confidence in the liberal, loving resistance to face and name the sins of these days. Even as these sins surge, racist and bigoted and petty and vulgar and desperate to distract from its own failings and lies, small moments of collective courage that name the evil and promote the ethical build into a growing and healthy movement. There are many kinds of courage, but the kind that will lead us out of today's shadows is only the collective kind. Yes, the big expressions of it, but also the daily kinds, enlivened in how we speak to neighbor and stranger and our kids, in what we say and how we say it, and how we spend our time and money and attention, in how we vote with our time and money and attention and ballots. In all of these economies, one small act does little, but many small acts add up. One vote, one word, one expression of kindness, justice, compassion, civility, and then one more, and one more, and one more, builds a movement of its own internal strength and faith. Even when it's formed in opposition to the brutish and the profane, it becomes its own human and holy movement for the good. And its fuel is always the small act, the single word, the ballot cast, aligned with others of the same size and scope, that build into a force that is inspiring and healthy and good and unstoppable. One becomes 4, and then 4,000, and then 4 million, and then 340 million, who don't agree on everything, but do move forward in the spirit of common decency and honesty and humanity. Small acts of courage can lead to this, even if they're imperfect or awkward. The collective can make good use of our imperfect and awkward individual acts of courage. Maggie Kuhn knew this. She is the late leader of the Gray Panther movement of the 1970s, which promoted rights and respect for the elderly in America, often marginalized and overlooked, demeaned and disregarded. Kuhn promoted dignity, equality, and inspiration for the elderly, and often did so with great humor and passion. And one of the things she taught the people in her movement was to, quote, speak your mind even if your voice shakes. She knew that even a shakily voiced demand for the good was better than silence. She knew that it took courage to speak that way, to be uncomfortable, to risk in that way, but coached those in her movement to work through all of that and say it anyway. That voice, imperfect and unsure, would still add to the strength of the larger movement, and it would disallow one to confuse silence with complicity or support. For though it would be tenuously expressed, moral opposition and moral clarity would come through even in the most jumbled of statements. The courage to speak in the face of silence has no one courageous form. There are many, but all build the good, shaky-voiced, shaky-kneed, however it sounds. When you do that, you're doing what's good and right and faithful. And those of us walking shoulder to shoulder with you admire you and know that it makes us all stronger. And it's this kind of collective kind of courage that can help us see through the shadows of today into the bright light of tomorrow. And we can see that what frightens us today, infuriates us today, is really only temporary. For as we face it together with shared strength and confidence and courage, we can see those frozen features of fear and insecurity that we thought were really scary. And we can know again how the shadows may frighten us and can mislead us, but they always go away with the light. We have the light of our chalice and the light of our faith and the light of our congregation and all of our congregations, in which we can gather to remember the good and praise the holy and serve the sacred and build the beloved community. We come here to kindle anew the light of love in our lives each week, for there is much in today's economies that profit from trying to extinguish that. But we come here to renew its flame in our hearts and then move into the world and shine that light on everyone in every place. Each instance of that happening is an act of courage, small in scope, sometimes shakily enlivened, but mighty in connection with everyone else's. And it all adds up to a new day coming, one in which even those who today frighten us will tomorrow be our neighbors, with whom we'll sit down and eat in peace and harmony. The shadows that send us scampering into the woods become, when we face them, something we can deal with, maybe on our own, but definitely together. Sometimes we can wait until the day springs break and the shadows flee, as the traditional benediction teaches, but sometimes we also can't wait. And then we have to shoulder to shoulder break the grip of those shadows ourselves by shining our own light in the world. That which we feared as kids sneaking out after dark was a shadow, but the real thing was in our dorm room, where the counselors had bunks and lived as well. When my friend and I tiptoed back into our room after sneaking out and thinking we were caught, we were quiet as church mice. We lay down on our beds, but before we had even taken off our shoes, the counselor, a college-age student named Tim, said into the darkness, "Did you guys have fun?" We had indeed been busted after all. We said with hesitance, "Yes." And he said, "Did all four of you go?" And we said, "Yes." And he said, "Are the others back in their room?" And we said, "Yes." And he said, "Are you going to do it again?" And we said, "No." And he said, Good night." And after an uneasy night's sleep, the next day, the shadows sang morning grace with us and smiled a knowing smile as he passed the eggs, and a new day began. So too is that new day coming for all of us, neighbor and stranger of every race and status, a day rooted in song and love and sustenance, one built by our collective courage, and one shining in the light of a love not always seen today, but a light that lives as long as we keep it lit. Let us shine that light especially into the shadows of today, that others will witness and build the courage to shine theirs as well. May it be so, and amen. At the end of our hour, we extinguish our chalice, knowing that its light stays with us till we gather again. Go forth grateful for the moments before you, the breath within you, the people among you, and the Spirit guiding you toward lives of love and kindness. And go forth knowing that you are held always and always with everyone else by that great love of no beginning and never ending. Go in peace, and amen.